Hi guys, welcome back to another review, and this time around I'm bringing you something special. I'm bringing you the RUVIEST Prelude. What is the RUVIEST Prelude? The RUVIEST Prelude comes from the same mastermind that was behind the brand called Our Audio. Our Audio had a number of fantastic IEMs. Two that jumped to mind were the Neon Pro and the Aurora. And Mr. Abel, which is the name of this gentleman, decided that it was time to create something new, to offer something new, and he's given us RUVIEST. This particular model, which is called the Prelude, is a 1+6, so it's the first model for RUVIEST. The case, as I was showing you momentarily, simple case, nothing, nothing over the top. It's got some details in the back about the characteristics of the IM. The only thing that really jumps to my mind, or you gets your attention, is the fact that it's got perhaps a lower than usual sensitivity of 102 dBs, and that's basically it. And in effect, what that means is that having a lower sensitivity than what is the more common value, it will need a little bit more volume for you to reach the levels that maybe you like. Although, as I always say, don't go blasting your ears. Inside it brings it's got some paperwork, okay, and then it brings a case with these tips, all right, and it brings the second of the terminations for the cable, which the cable has got exchangeable terminations. As for the tips are fine. They work, no issues with the tips. The only reason why I ended up opting for another tip rather than the ones that are the stock ones is that the outside of the tip is a little bit on the softer side, and it has a tendency of breaking seal in my ears, and with that I lose bass. Other than that, the tips are fine. I don't think there should be a problem, to be honest. I tried a couple of tips on the Prelude. I tried the Venus Velvet, I tried the KB ears, I tried the TRI Clarions, and honestly, be it the stock tip or be it these ones that I have here, which are from Panon, the difference is minimal. I've got the grass, which I'll show it to you in a second, but the difference is minimal. It's just more of how physically the tip maintains its composure. Anyway, enough of the accessories. Oh, of course, I forget. Brings a nice little case as well with the RUVIEST logo embossed and everything. Anyway, as for the IM itself, very nice resin shell, white color, but it's a nicely finished white color. Nice faceplate as well, as you can see. I get the impression that the faceplates are going to change all the time, in terms of there's no guarantee that you're going to get exactly the same faceplates, which is nice. It makes gives it a certain exclusivity. The IEM for a 1+6 is actually quite small. It's not a big IEM, and in my ears in particular, it fitted beautifully. There is see if you can see there the exit of the nozzle. You can see straight away the various ports for the different BAs and DD inside. There's a 10mm DD. There's a 2 BAs for the mids and for the highs, and then there's a combination. It's 2 dual high BAs. So effectively, we got 4 BAs handling the high frequency, 2 BAs handling the mids, and then a single 10mm IM handling the bass frequencies. Anyway, that's the IM. So physically, nothing to be said there. It fits nicely in my ears, and I'm assuming the majority of ears. It's very nicely built, nice cable, with exchangeable terminations. There's really not much I can complain, honestly. And even the complaint that I have was not a complaint. It was just a little, attention to detail, which is the fact that the tips are a little bit on the soft side. As for the price, we're talking roughly $350, give or take. So it falls within what is the usual value for a 1+6, and especially when you consider this is still fully handmade. It's I say a decent value. It's not out of context. It's not the exaggeration that we sometimes see from some brands, where the fact that the IM is handmade is automatically the justification for asking values which are just out of context. Anyway, onto the sound, which is what we want to know. And as is the case, I've brought out two IEMs here, not to compare to the RUVIEST, but these are two IEMs which have a similar style of sound to the Prelude, and as such, I thought, you know, it'd be just interesting to better show, or to better position the Prelude, so that you guys, by knowing maybe either one of these two IEMs, you can have an idea of what the RUVIEST is about, the Prelude is about, excuse me. I've got here the SLA3 from CKLVX Slevo, and I've got here the IVIPQ Phoenixia. Talking roughly $100, I'm talking about $160, so two IEMs which are in a totally different price bracket. This is a 1+3, this is a 1+6 as well, like the Prelude. Okay, so once you start listening to the Prelude, the thing that comes to you straight away is that perhaps, you know, you need a little bit more volume than usual, and I did find that was the case here with the Prelude, at least with me, because I had just listened to the other two IEMs, and I had left the volume at a specific level, and then when I put on the Prelude, you know, the volume was slightly lower. I mean, that's not a problem, it's nothing, it's just a little thing that struck me initially. If perhaps I had done the other way around, had listened to the Prelude first and then gone on to listen to those two other two, I would have not picked up on that, or it would have been different. But anyway, that's not in any way a criticism. Onto the actual breaking down of the frequency range, and how the timbre, the tonality, and what's the overall sound, and so on. This is a very old school style of tuning. And what do I mean by old school? It's got an emphasis on being musical as opposed to being clinical or technical. I would say that there are IEMs out there, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, that are going to definitely be more technical than the Prelude. Something like for example, the CKLVX, the CK2V, the QES, the Astral. Those will be more technical IEMs than the Prelude. But the Prelude does have a higher level of musicality, in my opinion, as compared to those IEMs. And that musicality comes from, in my opinion, a really nicely struck balance between the frequencies. Bass is a very high quality bass, you know, obviously taking in mind where the IEM is in its price bracket. So it's got a very nice quality bass. It's detailed, it resolves well. There's no real, I didn't really find that it was finding any difficulties in resolving complex passages or anything of the sort. Mids, clean, detailed. I honestly think the mids are the star of the show, in my opinion. And then highs are there in the right amount. And I think that's something which already from the days of our audio was a common characteristic. You would sometimes think that, oh, the highs are a little bit underwhelming, or the highs could be a little bit more. No, the highs were done in a way that they were always balanced with the rest of the frequency range. And yeah, in the Prelude, that's exactly the same situation. So the highs that exist, and when I show you the graph, you'll see there's plenty of energy up there, are in the right quantity for the rest of the frequency range, in my opinion. And if in any way they might sound, at least for those which are more technically inclined, lacking, it's mainly because the bass is, or the mid bass in the Prelude is a present mid bass. It's there. However, having said that, I didn't find that the mid bass in the Prelude was in any way overpowering or done in a manner which detracted from the rest of the frequency or was overwhelming. No, as I said, this is a musical IEM with an old school type of sound where bass, mids and highs are present in the right amounts, really nicely married, in my opinion. And yes, if you are a technically focused type of listener where you want the ultra detailed mids and highs and so on, this might not be the ideal choice because of this more organic and more musical type of sound. Usually what happens with the more technical type sounding IEMs is that they become very sterile, and that's my opinion. They become lifeless, and you know, I prefer life in my music. I prefer that the IEMs make the music feel feel that there's a vibe there if I'm trying to explain myself. Anyway, so as I said, bass beautifully done, mids in my opinion the start of the show, the highs perfectly adequate. If I am to nitpick, me personally, I found that the bass at times was a little bit lacking with certain genres, with certain songs that I like listening to. But that's mainly a thing which is me. It's personal. Maybe, or I think the majority will not find it that way. But for example, on From Dusk to Dawn from George Duke, I would have liked just a little bit extra slam to that song. But that's just me personally. That's the way I like listening to that song. Elephant from Carol Duboc, on the other hand, was perfect. There was nothing to be said there. Let me see, if I was going to go on to more, let's say, less audiophile genres, something like EDM and so on. There was a mix of results there. There were songs like Merida which were fine, and Cinematic Vibe as well, which were fine. But then there were others which a little bit more energy would have been welcomed, like Resistencia or Dusty Song. But that's, like I said, that's a personal thing, something which is down to me. With regards to rock, I'll be very honest, I didn't listen to anything of rock. I'm being totally honest, so I cannot give you, the rock fans, a definite opinion. What I will say ultimately with regards to what are the genres that I think the Prelude will be more comfortable with, I think the Prelude will be comfortable with genres which are vocal focused, with male vocals perhaps being the ones that will shine the most. I think the Prelude will do really well, and did do really well with more, let's say, pop, jazz, new wave jazz, R&B. That I think is the vibe that the Prelude will be the most comfortable with. EDM, yes, it will play EDM properly, but there are other IMs, for example, the Phoenixia, the IVIPQ. With EDM, it actually does sound more engaging, more satisfying. With EDM, that's not, I would say, the genre where the Prelude is in its element, but I mean, nothing that is a deal breaker in any way. Overall, I think it's a pretty competent IM that does most genres decently. Technically wise, timbre and tonality are definitely the ones that jump to me straight away, and because of the fact that I like this more musical approach, it's I think the best characteristic that it has. Detail, retrieval, resolution, macro and micro details are fine. I would say that the micro details, maybe here and there, they could have been a little bit more separation, so the resolution could have been a little bit more here and there, but again, not in any way a deal breaker. And I think that will again be very much down to the particular music that I like listening to. Having said that, and I again repeat what I said earlier, I think that the Prelude, because of the way that the highs have been tuned, and I think the highs have been tuned in this way so that there's a very good coherence between the drivers. I mean, we're talking 7 drivers, sorry. And if you are not careful with the way that you mix and match everything, then you will notice that the music is coming from different sources, and that's one thing that in the Prelude doesn't happen. You notice that it's a single source that's emitting all of that music, and there's no kind of distinguishing, oh, this is the BAs, this is the, no. So there's no BA timbre, that's what I'm saying. There's no metallicness to the sound. Everything is being very well matched, very well put together, and that then shows, that then manifests itself by the treble being adequate. It just, it's not an overwhelming or not a forward kind of or overemphasized type of treble. And again, to a large extent, the fact that the bass has been tuned in the way that it's been tuned also helps. But when you see the graph, you'll understand what I'm saying. So technically, definitely timbre and tonality are the better characteristics. Very nicely balanced, very realistic. Soundstage and imaging, I would say soundstage and imaging are adequate. Perhaps the soundstage edging out slightly the imaging, but it's not in that department where I think the Prelude really shines. And I mentioned that technically the Prelude is adequate. It does the job, but I think the Prelude is more focused on being a musical IM, and that's definitely where it will I think manifest itself and stand out. If you're looking for a musical presentation, definitely the Prelude will satisfy. In terms of the SLA and of the Phoenixia, like I said, these are two IMs which kind of have a similar style of sound. The SLA has got a more tucked style bass, and thus in certain passages that I was listening to, you noticed that the Prelude was being capable of filling out the missing mid bass in a better manner. But otherwise, the bass kind of is similar-ish, okay. And then in the higher frequencies, in the mids, highs, and mids, oh my god, the mids, the upper mid, and treble, the Prelude is definitely more polished, definitely more detailed, and I mean, it is 3 times the price, so it should be. But the SLA does give the same sort of vibe. The biggest thing that you'll notice is it's not as mature in the way that it does everything, especially when you start pushing the volume. You notice things just not being as balanced. But you know, if you like, let me put it to you this way, if you are a fan of the SLA sound, you will definitely like the sound of the Prelude, with keeping in mind the following: the Prelude will be significantly more polished, significantly more capable across the mids and the highs than the SLA, and maybe, only maybe, in the bass you will notice that the Prelude on occasions can be just a little bit more laid back as compared to the SLA, and only because of the different styles of bass tuning that they've had. Okay, this is more sub-bass focused with the tuck. This is a more gliding style of a bass. As compared with the Phoenixia, again, we have a similar style of tuning. The interesting thing here with the Phoenixia is that the Phoenixia, let me just quickly, I'm looking at the graphs while I'm actually speaking to you. The Phoenixia and the Prelude both have a gliding style of bass. In terms of how the mid bass is done and everything, and the upper mids and mids are done, again very similar. The difference that exists between the two of them is really in the mid bass. Actually, to better show this, let me just quickly show you the graph, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so here's the graph of the Prelude and of the Phoenixia. Let me just quickly take away firstly the Phoenixia, and I'm going to show you the graph of the Prelude, and I'm going to show you the graph of the Prelude with the stock tip and then with the tip that I'm using. Okay, so that's with the stock tip, and actually, let me make it red. Let me make the stock tip in red. Okay, that's the stock tip in red, and below that, not this one, let me correct here so that we get the right one, because there's another thing that I need to bring to your attention. Okay, and the one that I use now there, which I'm going to put it in black. Okay, all right, so this is the Prelude with its stock tip. As you can see, you know, huge mid bass, which in honesty, when you listen to it, doesn't translate to this huge mid bass that graphically it shows. A focus on the sub bass, which again I don't think is entirely 100% the reality. Mids definitely really nicely done. It's a slightly dropping off, as you can see. It peaks at just over 2K. The one now in the black is exactly the same thing, as you can see. I mean, I really couldn't notice any difference between one and the other, and that's using the Penon tips. Okay, look, the graph is the graph, you know, and there's some things that you can take away from it, some things that are going to be unrealistic, and I think the biggest thing to take away from the graph here is that to think that perhaps it's an overwhelming IEM in terms of the bass. I don't think it's an overwhelming IEM in terms of the bass. As I said, it's an IEM which has a very old school type of tonality, a very old school type of presentation. Yes, the bass is present, but I think the balance that is struck is always very nicely struck. And this brings me then to another aspect which I hadn't mentioned earlier, which is the fact that I did find the prelude to be sensitive to what the source it was connected to was. The graph that I just put on now in green is the prelude connected up with an ESS source. And I think that maybe that's the one area where some of you might, if you have obviously more than one DAC or dongle or source, you might be able to play around and then find a better balance to the type of sound that you want. The prelude with an ESS dongle, which is the green line, and the prelude with a Cirrus Logic dongle, which is the black line, it is two noticeably different IEMs. I have to say this outright, it is. With a Cirrus Logic source, it will be more technically inclined, for lack of a better word. There's a little bit more energy up top here, which just kind of maybe can better control things in terms of how the bass and the mids and the highs are for those which are more focused on the technicalities of the IM, while with an ESS dongle, which is personally how I preferred it myself, there's a focus on it being more musical, on it being more, so the green line here, let me just take away the black line, on it being more organic, and that balance that I like, you know, comparing, it shifts the balance into being a more warmer type of presentation, more organic, more musical. Again, for me personally, this is how I liked it the most, and how I found that those occasions that maybe there was a little bit extra or energy that was lacking in one or two songs, that's where I found that balance that I like myself. Having said this, again, it's like you know, you're going to have these dongles and or these different sources to try it out and see how it comes across. I was surprised, to be honest, because not a lot of IEMs are affected this way. I think most IEMs actually kind of end up sounding very, very similar, with some differences here and there, fine. The differences usually come from tips. Yes, with ESS dongles, we usually do have an IM that that is maybe a little bit more tuned for technicalities, let's put it that way, or that will bring out the technicalities of the IM. In this particular case, it wasn't. It was actually the other way around. It was the Cirrus Logic IEMs that actually brought out more the technical aspects of the IEM, that brought out more the vocals, let's say, as compared to the ESS. Look, it is what it is. It's as simple as that. Now, let me take here the Cirrus Logic one and compare it here quickly with the other two IEMs, namely the SLA. Okay, as I was saying, there's a definite difference here in terms of the mid bass between the one and the other. In terms of the mids, upper mids and treble, the mids kind of similar-ish, but you notice that the prelude is definitely more polished. It's a more well executed tuning, definitely. But you know, the idea here was, if you like the sound of the SLA, you will definitely like the sound of the prelude. And the other IEM was, and this being more of a fair comparison because it's also 1+6, is the Phoenixia from IVIPQ. Again, very similar, as you can see, very, very similar. The difference here is more that the peak of the pinna gain in the prelude is around 2.2, while the peak of the pinna gain on the Phoenixia is happening more closer to 3, and there's a kind of a meta style rise, let's put it that way. Yeah. Also, there's a difference here in terms of the mid bass energy of one and of the other. Again, the 100 hertz point compared to where it matches in the mids, you know, it's totally different to what it is on the prelude. I mean, if you look on the prelude, it's one thing. If you look here on the Phoenixia, it's a different story altogether. But the interesting thing is, when you do listen to the IEMs, they sound surprisingly similar. Especially the biggest area that I was not expecting was the bass on both of them sounds equal, and I would even say that the bass on the Phoenixia is sometimes even more present, more, if you want to call it, more colored, more emphasized than on the Prelude, which, you know, by looking at the graph you wouldn't think that. And I think, you know, especially then when you even consider how that 100 hertz point compares then to the mids and upper mids section, and it's just quite an interesting thing, and just goes to show that graphs can give you some information, but they will not be entirely correct in giving you a full idea of what an IM will sound like. Anyway, guys, I think I've already extended myself for way too long. The Prelude from RUVIEST is definitely an IM that I think is worth considering if what you're looking for is an old school type of presentation with a very nicely done balance between the frequencies, although you could maybe get the idea that it's overwhelming in terms of the mid bass. I didn't think that personally. I would say that definitely do play around with some dongles and some sources. Expect, in my opinion, that the ESS sources will maybe emphasize more the warmness of the IM, while the Cirrus Logic in this particular case, and I tried 4 different Cirrus Logic dongles and they all came out with a similar kind of result, was the one that maybe gave the better balance in terms of the overall frequency response. As for the frequency responses, and as I've said before, it's a sound which focuses, and the star of the show is definitely the mids, with bass and treble being the ones coming in slightly behind the mids, and where I found the treble to always be very adequate. Although, yes, if I was looking for the ultimate in terms of twinklies and sparklies, there could be a little bit more energy there, but it's more than compensated by the nicely struck coherence of all the drivers. And in terms of the bass, there were occasions where I found the bass was just missing out a little bit more. I would say that I would have liked a little bit more of the energy, or a little bit more emphasis, or a little bit more slam. I can't really, you have to actually listen to it to understand it, because like I said, by looking at the graph you wouldn't think that that would be the case, but 90% of the times the bass was more than adequate for what I listened to, and it made up for maybe that lack of slam here and there by being a very high quality bass. It's very nicely tuned, it's very clean, it's very detailed. It handled everything I threw at it in terms of detail very nicely. Honestly, I didn't really encounter any difficulty or anything that would be perceived as a difficulty in terms of the bass not being capable. Yes, the genres that will be more at home with the Prelude will definitely be genres like, you know, mentioned before, jazz and some classical pop. Let's put it this way: real music will be what the Prelude will do properly. Electronic music, there are other AMs that are more capable, let's put it that way. Okay. As for rock, I just didn't listen to it, so I can't give you a proper feedback on that. Alright guys, as always, like and subscribe. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask me, and I'll do my best to answer as quickly as possible. Thank you very much, and take care now. Bye bye.